congratulations on surviving the whole day and staying still here. It's hard, I know, even for myself. But I'm very lucky to be here today and to listen all very different perspectives on the same issue. And yeah, I'm gonna share my story about communicating to science. Again, I don't do like psychological research behind how it works and so on. These are just my observations. So I don't know if there's something conflicting with like what the David was saying, believe David. He knows that in depth. But my story of science communication kind of starts when I was still undergrad back in Lithuania, where I'm from. And all my communication, by the way, is kind of mainly Lithuania. I was just really excited about science. I was really excited to learn about molecular mechanisms and so on. And when I was in school, I was really kind of craving for that a bit more complex biology and so on. So therefore, like basically every year, I would return to my small town school where I studied from primary school to high school and give them simplified information, just something to hook up people how amazing molecular biology is. And one thing that I want to kind of advertise, go and speak to the small children. They're actually really interesting because by the last years of high school, they made up their minds. They kind of like, I know what I like and I don't want to hear anything else. Primary school children ask questions and it's really, really fascinating. But yeah, as an undergrad, we went to many schools to teach people how to do, let's say, a PCR, electrophoresis, like how you can amplify DNA. There's no intention that they will be molecular biologists. It's just that they learn about the process. Like one of them ended up being like a very good jazz singer and so on, right? But like we just discuss biology and they can learn the basics. We went to organize many cafés scientifiques where we just meet in a cafe and, for example, discuss synthetic biology and genetically modified organisms and so on. I tried to do a little bit of research outreach while doing my PhD here locally. And like sometimes I went to schools, sometimes like we organized some games and I organized some talks on virus discovery because I work on RNA viruses. And I'm just going to use this opportunity to talk a little bit about viruses because context matters. Just looking at mammals, there are like over 6,000 species, and they have over 3,000 known mammalian viruses. But there's actually research behind it, which does the estimate based on like sequencing results and so on, that there are way many more out there. And in the last few years, actually virus discovery like exploded in their research, and we're still not there yet. And among those mammalian viruses, actually, there are about 200 which can infect humans, but these can have a potential to jump into us, right? But these 200, even though it's a lot, they can group into families. Like these are the groups of viruses that they share some information between them. So, but I work on identification of very diverse, different viruses. Like ideally, it's totally new family, it's totally new group. My primary subject are insects. They have a lot of uncharacterized viruses and so on. I care about molecular biology and evolution. And actually, when a new virus was discovered, it was not that interesting because it's coronavirus. We knew that there are many quite similar viruses, and actually it is very beneficial to us that actually the new emerging viruses, they frequently are from these 20-something families, so we have some information on that. But again, I was not that keen on it. But then I saw that back home, even though there were no cases, people started getting a bit like into panicky mode. You know, like there are no cases, but people are buying, beans and something and staying home and being really scared, and I got so many messages. So when there were no cases in Lithuania, people stayed home. When it started increasing, people were by the time already tired of staying home, and that was a bad policy. Like if you start like being protective way too soon, then you're gonna have problems down the road. And because of that, I received so many questions, personal messages on Facebook and so on, that I was like, I can't handle this. And then I put out just Google Doc form where people could ask questions, so then I can group them and answer them on my Facebook feed. And journalists love that. And because of that, I was invited to speak on national TV and so on. And this is actually how my kind of 2-year saga of extremely a lot of science communication started. I had over 60 interviews. Probably I declined the similar level of number of them. And these are just the lessons that I want to share with you today. So first of all, just go and talk. If you're actually excited about your research and science, go and talk if you have an option. And because I feel we can't stop misinformation. And like myself being Lithuanian, we are constantly attacked by Russia's impacts to trying to distrust the government, distrust the scientists, like whatever the narrative is. So we can't stop that, right? But we can try to put a lot of higher content, higher quality content out there and just trying to balance that out. But just our papers, it's not enough. We need the weight of scientists to come in and try to balance that out because, my parents, they wouldn't go on like PubMed to read publications and they are not trained to understand that. So I think that doing that, we build resilience to the future. This is this inoculation for misinformation, right? That you would not fall for that. And I think that building resilience, it really starts at the school. And I feel if you go to the school and talk to the students about the very, very basics, how stuff happens, how synthetic method works, like you can do little experiments with the kids. This is like super impactful. And I feel as myself that, going for one day, spending one day in a primary school might look a lot to take away from my work, but I feel that's way much more impactful than actually another one day in the lab. And like we met like one girl who said like, oh, I cannot understand this, I'm stupid, because like everyone says I'm stupid. And just telling her that like, no, you're not stupid. And it's really heartbreaking to hear like a 7-year-old saying that they are stupid. So these kind of conversations can actually have a massive impact. And maybe, ignite some curiosity in that child's life, and it might be life-changing. As a separate bit, I wanted to say journalists need help. And I feel sometimes people, they want to be approached and so on, but like if you see a problem with some article in a, good source media or something, email the author, email the journalist, give them resources, give them papers, explanations, and so on. They are actually, from my experience, they're actually quite happy to do that and fix their mistakes. And one thing that I experienced during pandemic was that actually some journalists, they would just like text me before publishing something like that, is this of same like mind, like is this okay to publish and so on, or like do you have any information on that issue which would be trustworthy and so on. And actually I think that was my favorite part of all of it, because it's less stressful because you can sit down, collect some info and send to them or discuss. And I think it really prevents the spread of misinformation, which might be just genuine by accident because they just didn't know anything better. And I think if you want to do this, go and do this. If you feel comfortable to go and talk, but don't do that for fame and recognition. And I feel there are some people who are doing that. And I think my big struggle inside was that if I'm not going to do that, I know the people back home who are going to go and talk. Like if journalists invited me and I said no, I know what's the next person after me is, or like a third person in a row, and they will talk because they don't care if the responsibility is not there. They don't care what they're gonna speak. They just want to be on a telly. There are a lot of people like that. So if you care, go and talk. Put yourself out there. Yeah. And I think most importantly, don't be afraid to go back to your hometowns and home countries. I don't. Who is here who's not being born and who didn't go to like primary school in Cambridge, who's from away? Like everyone basically. Because I want to say, go back to your like home places to do the communication, because people will also trust you. They know you. They will be more open asking questions. And Cambridge already has, primary school has like world leading 10 institutes at their like 8-year-olds day. I've been there, so it's, I think the further away from Cambridge, the better. And I think that's something that we as Cambridge academics could do, because that's way much more impact. And with that, I think I want to switch to a second point, which is know your audience. I think you should have an educated guess what your audience knows. Like, if you talk to primary school children about your latest publication and the recent trends in like RNA virus discovery, That's not good, but that's brilliant for conference, right? So you need to know what do they know. And I think the general rule of thumb is speak the way that the least knowledgeable person in the room would understand you. It's even good for conferences, right? Like if there's a lot of jargon, it's really hard. So speak the way that this little child probably in primary school can understand. And I know maybe people are aware about this game or challenge where explain your research on 5 different levels, starting from primary school and ending up with like a professor in your field. So I feel like when we talk to general public, TV or something, we are here. So speak in a way that really people who do not have a clue about your research could understand. And that means I feel it's a bit conflicting with the first talks that we need to provide nuance and context and so on, but I feel it's also a bit a balance of what you can actually tell for what kind of audience. But I think let's talk in a way that they can understand and that might ignite curiosity to go and seek further and deeper information on that. The other point where I asked a question before is like, choose who you speak to. I really didn't want to talk to the powerhouses of misinformation, which there are some media outlets like that. And I didn't want to legitimize them. Like, I feel if we have good information there, as well as like all the bad information there, I'm kind of giving the reason that they are okay source, which they are not. I made one like compromise with my integrity where I went to the biggest media outlet in Lithuania, but they are not as bad. And I thought that this way people who usually do not listen to national broadcaster probably will listen to that one. And it was not like 30 seconds or something that they would snip. It was like a proper long interview. So don't compromise your integrity and choose who you talk to, because like sometimes you have 10-minute interview, which they record, and then they clipped 30 seconds out of that. Usually totally not the main point that you wanted to say. So you really need to trust who you talk to, I think, as other speakers also mentioned. And I think coming from the audience, it's also knowing your audience is the same as like, what's the quantity of information and how deep again you go. And if you have a lot of time, that's great, provide context, provide all the nuance. If you have 1.5 hours every week with the undergrad students, of course, go into the detail. If you give a lecture, I was giving some lectures to some big companies and so on, where we had Q&A at the end. That's great. I can tell them molecular biology dogma. I can actually show them, that we don't encode as humans reverse transcriptase. So basically, there is no fundamental reason how like RNA vaccine can integrate in us. Like there are, for example, these corner cases where it might happen, and you can discuss these in length. But sometimes it might be too much context. And I feel like if you have 1 minute on radio or something, and you spend like 20 seconds that vaccines are good and 40 seconds talking about all the risks, in people's minds it's like equal probability, right? Like, because you spend the equal amount of time speaking, and that might be actually very misleading because it might be a bit too much context for specific people. I feel that that's my opinion, and I know that balanced view works better, but if I have 30 seconds to say, I think I should say what's his general consensus in scientific community who are experts in that field, and then I can go into nuance if I have more time. Because I feel like there was actually in COVID times not that much new information. I was like getting interviews very frequently, and it's just like, why do we need to talk a lot about this and complex stuff and so on? General idea about like what's needed in the pandemic or in virus outbreak hasn't changed, and it's probably the same as it works for all the other viruses. So I feel that if you have just like a short amount of time to spread information, talk what's the absolute truth in the majority of cases. Of course, with like, I'll go to that, but if you talk about health, you never know if your listener is that corner case. So we have this safety net, which is talk to your GP always about all your health problems, because in all the interviews, I really try to emphasize, I'm not a medic, I'm a virologist. Like, don't ask me which drugs to take. I can tell you what kind of drugs, what kind of molecular pathways they do and what they do in a simplified way, but I'm not going to advise you on what to take. Like, I'm not a medic. I'm a doctor, but not a medic. And I think that this is why I was quite annoyed that why do we need to speak about spike mutations or like virus evolution and different variants? I feel that creates chaos in people's head. A lot of people had anxiety problems and so on because it's like bombarding of a lot of information they are not capable of understanding because you don't have fundamental like background knowledge. And it's actually, it could lead even to be dangerous. You know, people are discussing and like questioning why PCR is used for detection while they actually probably can't tell the difference between DNA, proteins, and RNA. It's like really tricky situation. And I think this quote by Confucius, I'm not sure, I'm not a historian and not a philosopher, but I feel I want it to be rephrased in a bit different way, that if you learn about like very complex concept and you're not willing to go deeper, you have no option to go deeper, the very, very basic understanding just of the field, I feel that could be dangerous. And this is when you have pseudo specialists and pseudo expertise. And I feel then if they cannot easily explain what's that complexity behind it, people who are spreading misinformation or people who want to exploit that people are confused, they will use that. And I feel this is when people are going towards the rabbit hole into cult-like Facebook groups and so on, with the leaders who are telling them whatever crazy stuff. And I think that's just kind of the rule on the amount of context. I feel like if you have just a little time, what's most likely, what's the general truth? You can always say like, of course there are small nuance, but like if we need to know one thing, that's it. You know, vaccines work. If there are other nuance, of course there are. But if you have enough time, then I would just not try to debunk thing after thing that I think was mentioned multiple times today. I just try to explain the fundamentals, like how things work, because I feel that inoculates them for future, that they wouldn't fall for misinformation. And I think lastly, not fully lastly, but like I want just to say that we need to choose our battles to fight. And I know that a lot of the talks today were, I think, about like talking to like really kind-hearted, maybe a little bit lost, but willing to discuss people. But I feel there are groups of people that, you know, they are too extreme and you won't change their opinion in a one chat. And I think that these situations are hopeless. You're going to waste your energy, you will be stressed and so on. And you cannot unwind the web of lies. And there's just like case study of 1 week ago, I was invited for a radio interview where two sides would discuss, and I was like a judge at the end to comment on that. And one of the rounds, they had the most risk-aware person in Lithuania who was speaking there. It's like really tricky situation. You know, we kind of don't want to get in the same room as those people because it's like, especially on live air, like you can't rebuttal everything they say. That person is not in this picture, just to want to clarify. I didn't want to show him off. But I feel the moment he started saying his thing, it started the opening statement, which is not true. Then on that, he builds another statement, which is also not true. It sounds scientific. That's the problem. It sounds scientific that, you know, there is like no data or something. They were really questioning that it's probably unsafe to get like COVID booster and flu vaccine at the same time. Meanwhile, like there are hundreds of millions of people being vaccinated like that. And, you know, like, and they're, oh, but there are no like blindsided studies and so on and that. And they say that, oh, I'm pro-vaccines, but not COVID. It's just like, it doesn't work. So basically it was like lies and lies and lies. I called out on some of his lies in that show, but I cannot debunk every one thing. There's no airtime for that. Afterwards, of course, he wrote the whole Facebook post about this, how I'm not qualified to say that because I'm not a medic. I never said I was a medic. There was another medic on the show who commented from medical side. Like I commented on like scientific publications and you know, scientific method and all that kind of stuff. So it's just like, I choose my battles. I don't go under his post, and I'm not gonna fight with those hundreds of people in his comment sections like logic there doesn't work. So like they already heard me multiple times, other medics and so on. It didn't change their opinion, so my one comment won't change. But it's actually, if I see that someone is a little bit lost and I know that person, I know that they are willing to talk, I would go and talk to that person. And I think one thing that I didn't plan to say, but on Facebook, if I see, for example, under governmental or like broadcasters, some kind of post that all the comments are likely trolls or something like that, and all the information is like from alternative universe, I really like to put a well-thought comment in there. So just in case someone of a sane mind who is doubtful is reading through the comments, they could see that there is also alternative opinion, which is like actually the real opinion, not the alternative one. So they wouldn't feel like lost and alone in this alternative world. So yeah, again, people, I feel like really bad at comparing likelihoods. And for example, this risk-aware person, he speaks a lot about risks. And you know, based on that, for example, there was a case where a pregnant lady, she died. They rescued the baby, and the last post that she shared on Facebook was by that person and that like association that they have. And you know, who's to blame for the death of that person? And it is misinformation, and what it is, they are not responsible. You know, in a way, like there's legal stuff as well. So I think let's talk with the people who want to learn, who want to discuss, who want to have a respectful dialogue, even if they have a different opinion. And I think lastly, I just want to say, if you go out there and do that, just take care of yourself. I think at some point, like I was invited to advise the government when we were in this spiky part, and it was really, really hard. And then I wanted to initiate a sequencing project because Lithuania didn't do sequencing, so you couldn't have informed decisions and so on. That came with a lot of challenges. I thought that being not affiliated with Lithuanian institution would help. It actually didn't. Many different reasons why people were against like these kind of things. And after we established it, I handed it to other people who were working with me to write that project. I gave up my seat at that council and suggested even better substitute for me, someone that I trust and who's a really good researcher. And I think I've done enough. Like I did this because I felt I have a duty to help. This is virus-caused pandemic. I'm a virologist. I can help with that. There might be no such case in the future. You know, I postponed my dissertation and papers and so on, which have an effect on my career. But I feel I've done enough. And afterwards, I could spend more time with my family, and now I have a little toddler that I can practice science communication with. And tomorrow I'm going to be in sixth form, Hills Road, where we have a big biology day. So if you want to come, I feel like I'm not doing that much of science communication now. Pandemic, I think it's like we know what to do, but please, you know, go and do. And these are just the things summarized, you know, what I just said. So yeah, go and talk. But choose your battles. Don't strain yourself too much, because angry, tired people and so on, they fall usually under misinformation.